Welcome to the Bicurian Podcast, where we explore and embrace the seeming contradictions of life. What actually is Bicurian, you ask?
Well, you may not necessarily have a mental concept of Bicurian, partially maybe because it's a made-up word. You embody it. What's happening right now in terms of the divisions between us is a focus on that which is different.
And lack of understanding and empathy for people's beliefs is no longer an excuse.
And it is in the differences we carry in ourselves that we find the Bicurian moment.
When you really dig into something, you're going to see some depth to it. It's not just a race thing. It's not just a conservation thing.
It's letting go of the or to make room for the and. We embrace all of you. Welcome to the Bicurian.
Hi, I'm Eric.
And I'm Aisela.
Welcome to this week's podcast. And this week we have a special guest. Perhaps you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Summer. I'm a physician in California, family doc, and I also have a podcast. We do medical myth busting.
Medical myth busting. So maybe we can start there before we get to our topic, which we'll just intro that is going to be, with it being the new year, all of the food, diet, health myths that probably are suddenly not only flooding everybody's email box, but also on everyone's mind.
I just want to interrupt you and say we are not going to cover all of the food, diet.
Would that even be possible?
Myths. Exactly. No. I have other things to do with my weekend.
Yes.
Your episode would need to be like 5 hours long.
Easily.
So before we dive into that subject, tell us about your podcast.
Oh, so we're What the Woo. We're a medical myth busting podcast. It's myself and Dr. V, and she's a veterinarian, and we just discuss random shit and the crazy shit that humans do and the animal corollaries, and it's pretty fun. We're over at whatthewoopodcast.com.
And we'll link to that in the show notes.
Absolutely. So, in the spirit of the after holidays,
can I share this one since? The article?
Aisela's got the first article that she's found for us to discuss.
I was actually really excited because when I shared this summer, it was actually something new for her, and it always feels pretty cool when you can, bring something new to somebody who's an expert. And it's an article I found in The Guardian in 2018 about the 10,000 steps per day thing.
So this isn't new, obviously. This has been going on for a little while.
And yeah, lots of people. I personally used to have a little Fitbit, and I would, really work to get my 10,000 steps so that I could be fully heart healthy and anti-diabetic.
And I have to admit, I just thought that was some arbitrary number that people came up with.
And you were not wrong. It's an arbitrary number that the Japanese came up with. It was actually a Japanese company, Yamasa, and we wanted to capitalize on the popularity of the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. And they designed the world's first wearable step counter, and they called the device Mampo-K, which translates as
10,000 steps.
10,000 step meter. And that's where that comes from.
So literally they were doing this to sell their step meter.
They were doing this to sell their step meter. And, I'm sure, we were talking about this before the show. Obviously, people getting up and moving is healthy. It's good for them to move their bodies, right? Or am I wrong about that?
You are not wrong.
Oh, good.
I mean, clearly, you want to be active, right? We have lots of research that shows that just physical activity protects your heart, and sitting on your butt is bad news bears.
Bad news bears. There you go.
Yeah, I think there's been some recent, media outreach and research that people have been talking about that's basically saying that sitting itself is a cardiovascular risk factor now. I personally haven't read the research on it, but, clearly the point is that you need to get off your bum and be active.
I think we, in America and several other countries, have become fairly sedentary. I mean, it's, we work, we sit down. I know at my job, like standing desks suddenly became popular. I find it's harder for me to concentrate if my feet are sore. But one aspect to the whole Fitbit thing is that I like is the buzzer that reminds you to get up every hour. Like it'll buzz and just remind you to, stand up and take a walk away. That's good for mind and body.
I feel like it's judging me. I don't like it.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, and the thing that they said in the article that I found to be particularly relevant is that this 10,000 step goal is 100% arbitrary and completely based on marketing from the 60s for this company. And the research that's been done around it hasn't actually been done to investigate what level of activity is beneficial and in relation to what level of health you're starting with. And one of the downsides to the 10,000 step goal is that if somebody is particularly sedentary or unhealthy, what can happen is they can try for, a week or a month to hit this 10,000 steps and not achieve it, get discouraged and quit moving.
Absolutely.
Rather than actually working up to what's good for them.
Absolutely. Like in my practice, I was big on, okay, yeah, you need to be more active, but literally you just need to be more active than you were before, right? We have a lot of research that shows that 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week is really, of cardiovascular activity is really what's good for your heart. But in reality, like, that's just too big of a goal for folks. Like my thought is like, if you're on your butt all day watching Netflix, like if you take a walk to your neighbor 3 doors down and back, that's a win, right? You're doing more than you were before. And, if that can be your goal, and then the next week you're walking, 5 houses down, and then the next week you're walking completely around the block, I feel like those are all wins and we're all making progress towards better health. When we put these arbitrary numbers on things, we're not helping people, right? We're just beating them down.
Yeah. And that was what I really got after reading the article, was this moment of, oh, wow. Instead of encouraging people to be more active than they were, we're throwing this number out that's 100% made up.
Well, for me, I think it's important to not have arbitrary things. Like for me, exercising is cycling 10 miles 3 to 5 times a week. But for most people, I think any kind of movement at all, a few steps a day. And that's a thing too. I find I'm actually seeing a nutritionist right now. And I both for just being in better shape and managing my weight and all of this. And one of the points, she brought up, I'm one of the least obese people that she works with. And for her, just getting people to do something every day.
Yes.
Something simple.
Well, I point out to folks that everyone thinks, oh, I've got to go to the gym and I have to have a workout. No, just being active is useful, right? And I hate working out personally. So, the way that I get my movement is that I work in my garden and I work in my yard and I'm pulling weeds. And, those squats pulling weeds are probably just as good as being at the gym. And I'm getting some shit done in my yard.
And again, I think that's just it. So I guess maybe if the Fitbits have done anything positive, it's probably just remind people to move at all.
I actually appreciated I am a person who very much likes to see my progress, and I like sort of an objective assessment. And so the Fitbit for me was really good in that way, where in the same way that tracking my food, even if I'm not tracking my calories, if I'm simply paying attention to what I'm putting in my mouth, I tend to put better things in my mouth than if I'm just eating whatever. And the Fitbit for me kind of did the same thing, where seeing that, oh, I actually was sedentary 3 days in a row. Whereas if you'd asked me, how many times last week were you sedentary? I would have been like, oh, no, I move on a regular basis. And so it was just sort of an objective assessment for me to recognize that, no, that's not it. And I have to put some effort into remembering to do that, because the life that I live doesn't require me to move to gather food or to get to work or whatever. I only, I have to move to cook or clean my house. I don't clean my house every day. I'm not that person. Confession.
Yeah, exactly. The Fitbits bring activity to the forefront of your mind, which is awesome. But saying that you have to do 10,000 steps, it sounds like is, completely arbitrary, and it was just to make some sales.
Yep, it's completely made up. And it's just so funny to me. So at any rate, I really appreciated that as a reminder also that the health fads, they can have some benefit. There are things that are behind why people think it works. Like 10,000 steps is arbitrary. However, regular physical activity is evidence-based health benefits. And so recognizing that it's not necessarily throw the whole thing out. However, notice the parts that are based in reality and don't get down because you're not at 10. If you're at 5,000 and you're feeling good, or you're moving more than you were, or you're doing it 3 times a week or 30 minutes, then be good with that. See that as a win.
Absolutely. All we ask for is progress in the right direction.
Exactly. So that brings up the next thing, and it was kind of mentioned about the things we are putting in our mouth. And another aspect to this time of year is not just the exercise, but also what diets people are on. So from that point of view, I feel like there's some interesting ones going on right now. 2018 feels like the year.
This time of year is just all sorts of craziness, and everyone's signing up for the latest fad, right?
Right. And I feel like 2018 it started out with a little bit of the gluten-free hangover, which we can get to in a moment, but it feels like it was the year of coconut oil.
God, I feel like it's been more than a year. And I mean, maybe it's just because coconut oil pisses me off, but people are they think it can do everything, right? And it's not really helping. I mean, if you like the taste of it, right, and you want to cook with it, okay, but swishing it in your mouth for oral health, or using it as a vaginal lubricant, or using it to help you lose weight, like all of those things are just crazy speak. I don't know why people think that it's, the latest and greatest thing.
Do you know where those trends came from, other than the marketing fad thing? Or
probably the Coconut Growers Association, I would guess.
I feel like you're right. I don't actually know where this started. Certainly it seems to me like it's yet another one of those, like, this is natural, so it's better kicks. And
why is it any more or less natural than any other oil, though? Like, I mean, sure, you can get organic coconut oil, but I can get organic olive oil, organic any kind of oil.
Right. And I mean, the whole organic concept is another thing we can talk about, because organic isn't necessarily healthier either. But, I don't honestly know where this came from, but certainly everybody thinks coconut oil can, cure what ails you.
So what are the detriments to coconut oil? There's this article that Eric sent me, and I'll put that in the show notes, that the title of it was, and it's part of what inspired the episode concept, was coconut oil is pure poison.
That was a few months ago that a pretty respected doctor.
Yeah, I did some research. About this, and I actually have that article up right now, because that was, clearly one of the most recent ones that came out. But Harvard has done a lot of research and has posted a lot about coconut oil. And really the point is that, this has really not some great fat in it. It is full of saturated fats, and that's not a good thing.
So I always get this mixed up, and there may be some folks who are listening that do the same thing. Why, when people say saturated, unsaturated, polysaturated, unsaturated,
monounsaturated, yeah.
So why is one better or worse to consume in in moderation or appropriate amounts or whatever?
Oh gosh, you're asking me a lot of science that I don't have on the forefront of my brain right now.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, in general, what I've gathered, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are certain ones that do contribute to building up in your arteries, and that
absolutely, in
general, some of them will more directly affect cholesterol levels, regardless of the amount of cholesterol that you're ingesting. I had always heard that a general rule of thumb is any fat which is solid at room temperature generally has the bad kinds of fats, which was a good marker that olive oil was better than coconut oil just on that basis.
Actually, that is a very good point. And so you are correct that that fats that are solid at room temperature are made of different types of fats than our liquid fats at room temperature. And generally, we do find that things that are solid at room temperature have a lot more fats that are not healthy for you and that can lead to coronary artery disease.
And I think that's
the big concern, right? Is that, you know, we can eat whatever we want, but we want to stay healthy and we want to live longer. And what we do know is that, you know, fats contribute to coronary artery disease, and coronary artery disease kills you.
Exactly. And I think that for me was what kind of caught my attention, was that everybody was saying that they acknowledged that coconut oil had some downsides, but it was a superfood. That's another great word that I love hearing, that it was so filled.
What the fuck is that?
It was so filled with different nutrients and stuff that it was beneficial regardless of the downsides. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think we have science that really supports that. You know, I think that it's really important to make our decisions not based upon what, you know, is healthy and what is the latest and greatest thing, and more just about, you know, evidence-based health choices. And I mean, it's funny because I joke with my friends that if it's a fad, it's probably bad for you. Like, because fads are about popularity. They're not evidence-based because we haven't had time to do the science to figure it out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tell me what you think about.
I feel like we could talk about, you know, really complicated science around all of these, but really what it comes down to is just making smart choices in moderation, right? You know, have your coconut oil, but, you know, just a tablespoon of it a day. You don't need to be swishing it and swallowing it in your mouth 5 times a day and, you know, using it as, you know, to help your skin heal when you get cuts, you know, all of those weird things that other people say that coconut oil has, right? Just make smart choices and use moderation.
Again, I think that's the key lesson in this episode, period, is most of these are make a smart choice based on evidence.
Well, and when I first started thinking about it, it really reminded me of the whole snake oil concept, in that, you know, we as humans, and I could just speak from personal experience, I would love to be able to sit and watch my favorite Netflix shows and eat peanut butter, chocolate chip ice cream, and nothing else, and be svelte and muscular and mentally active. And that's just not going to happen. I need to eat vegetables and fruits and lean meats and proteins, and I need to go out and engage in life and do work and clean my house and exercise. And then I'm going to have the life that I want and the physicality and the health that I want. And I feel like what happens is something comes along like coconut oil, and it's like, oh, this will make it so that I don't have to do these other things. I don't have to discipline myself, and I will have a solution. It's the snake oil of today.
Oh, absolutely. Like, we all want the magic bullet, right? I mean, certainly, like, I would love it if I could chomp on some coconut oil and drop 50 pounds, but that's not realistic. Yeah, I mean, again, there's literally no magic bullet to this, right? We just need to have, you know, healthy, well-rounded diets. I think, you know, we had talked about some of the other diet fads, right? Like keto, paleo, Atkins. I mean, I feel like Atkins was way long time ago, and keto and paleo are just the stepping stone after those.
Right.
Yeah. You know, same thing though, right? Like, it's all about, you know, carbs are evil and fats are good. I don't think we can say that.
Well, and speaking of that, I think in some limited research and just kind of sniffing around, what I found is that back in like the 70s, fat was kind of villainized. And I remember growing up in the 80s, everything had to be low fat. and everything was about low fat, low sugar. High fat diets were villainized and stuff. And it's like this almost feels like a pendulum swinging back as people are saying, oh no, fats were villainized. I've had a chef buddy of mine tell me that, fats got villainized and they're actually the good thing and the carbs were the bad thing. And that's where the Atkins came from, and paleo and keto and all of these. When I think it's probably somewhere in the middle between the two.
Yes. I mean, honestly, like you can kind of go back to the old food pyramid that we all learned in like elementary school, right? Where the base of your pyramid is supposed to be mostly fresh fruits and vegetables. And then, fats and meat are up higher than that. Sugars are up higher on the pyramid. So that means, less of your diet is supposed to be that, unfortunately, I think that's why these diet fads stick, right? Because it allows people to eat things that they think are traditionally bad for them. And now they get to go gung ho, and, diets are best when people go gung ho, right? I mean, clearly from a medical perspective, that is not true, but, that's why people do diets, right? Because they can feel like they're drastically changing their life, and they're making all these sacrifices, and they're cutting huge sections of their diet out, all in the name of dropping weight and becoming healthier. Yeah. Well, no, like honestly, it's like running a marathon, right? This isn't a sprint. You're going to do it slowly but surely, making small changes in your diet and your exercise towards health. Eating 5 pounds of bacon a day on the Atkins diet is not what's going to get you healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine turned me on to, she was doing Weight Watchers, and I was like, well, I'll give that a shot. And it was really good for me. And it was really good for me because it changed my eating habits. Like I haven't been using the app. I just used the app. I didn't go to like any program groups or anything like that. And it was so much better for me than counting calories, because the way they do it is all of the foods that are healthy, which I traditionally avoided because I was a fat and sugar girl all the way. Those foods they were kind of free. Even though they do have calories, they didn't count at all. And so when I was really hungry, I would just pig out on carrots and broccoli and blueberries and grapes. And even though there's a lot of like sugar and everything, for whatever reason, I still lost weight. And then after I stopped doing the program, that is still my go-to. Not just that I'll go to it reluctantly. It's actually what I crave. Like we have ice cream in the freezer.
So almost like a habit. It's
become a habit. Like we have ice cream in the freezer, but I go for the blueberries or the carrots because they have become more interesting to me. And it actually changed the way that I related to food, which I thought was really great, versus the 800 million other things I had tried that really just got me to feel restricted and to count my calories. But then as soon as I stopped counting, I just went right back up.
Well, exactly. And that's why Weight Watchers works for so many people, is because it shows you what things are safer foods and what things are unsafe. And that's just guidance that people need. And it isn't highly restrictive, right? Mm-hmm. It is working with just normal life and saying, hey, but there are consequences, right? If you're going to eat a cheesecake, that's going to be more points, i.e. more calories, more carbs, more whatever. And that is going to mean that you need to cut back on other things. And it's interesting that their free foods are generally like high fiber foods, right? And we do know that high fiber, fiber is filling. Fiber does help some with, fat and cholesterol disposition from your body. So, it helps to bind and helps you poop it out. These are all good things, right? We want to increase fiber in people's lives, but when we do these, when we do highly restrictive diets, we're generally not increasing fiber.
Well, and interestingly, I started on it because I had really bad cholesterol numbers, and I had really good ones, and then they just shot up. And so I did the Weight Watchers, and I went back in 6 months later, and my numbers were incredibly good. And the nurse was like, "Do we put you on medication?" And I'm like, "No, I just changed my diet." And she was like, "That's really impressive that your diet changes led to this significant of a change for the better. And and that for me was another level of affirmation that the things that my mom said when I was a kid, eat more fruits and vegetables and high fiber and move your body, is actually the fad diet that I need to be following.
Absolutely. And I think what you learn on things like, Weight Watchers is that, again, we don't need to demonize fruits, right? Because fruits generally get this bad rap of they're all sugar, bad, bad, bad. No, it's the whole concept of that you can have fruits. You just need to make sure that you're not drinking 5 gallons of orange juice in a day. You need to do everything in moderation and stay well balanced.
That makes sense. So I do have a question. Because of your, background as a doctor, what kinds of things have you seen over the years that have made you aware of certain red flags? Have you seen any diets cause things? I know I've got friends that had been big into the butter in the coffee thing, which is apparently a keto thing. I don't even know. And were forced to quit it when they had to have their gallbladders removed.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, right? Our bodies aren't really meant to be processing huge fat loads and huge protein loads, which most of these diet fads are really focusing these days on fat and protein, as in don't restrict those, right?
Or push them really hard.
Exactly. I think that's the key. So, speaking of gallbladders, your gallbladder's job in this world is to, take bile from your liver and spit it out into your intestines so that you can break down proteins and fats. And so when you're doing these wackadoo diets, you're really just making your gallbladder work overtime. And, it usually doesn't appreciate that and reacts with pain or stones.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even thought about it, and the reason I found that out was because of all of the people that I met that had issues bad enough to have them removed.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah. So, general recommendations. We can wrap up. We've had a couple of good here. I think, obviously getting up and moving. That's always good. Start a light workout regimen. Start a more hardcore workout regimen if you're been working out and you feel like you can handle it. Maybe add a couple of extra days. Find things you can do. One of the things I found that really helped was finding things I could do with the TV on, because then I could feel like maybe I was hanging out with the family watching TV, but also able to do something active, lifting weights or something like that.
Sure. I think that, the old adage of incorporating activity into your routine is key, right? Because if you have to suddenly change your life and go to the gym 2 hours a day, it's never going to happen. So yeah, absolutely. Do your workouts in front of the TV, or, some folks, if they work from home and have a fairly sedentary life, I've seen some folks get those bicycles that are a bicycle desk, so they're actually, cycling while typing on their computer. For me, again, my physical activity is doing things that I love outside, because that's my motivation, is getting outside and into the sun, because I'm in San Diego where it's sunny and warm all the time.
I'm so jealous.
I know. I kind of wanted to throw that jab in there real quick. It's gorgeous right now. Actually, it's only 70 degrees right now, but...
Can you hear me rolling my eyes at you?
Yeah. So anyways, workouts, get outside, do your thing, or do it in front of the TV, or, heck, there's what was the video game that had the activity pad that you ran on? Yes.
I used to play that in the mornings and watch Battlestar Galactica.
Honestly, when I was seeing patients, especially the gamer dudes, I'd be like, get on, play your game, but do it on Wii Fit. It's not, a cool game usually, but at least you're still gaming.
I had a guy who's
play with your friends.
There's a guy who's a friend of mine who swore by being on an exercise bike while he gamed. So that's just what he did. Just pedaled while he was playing.
Yeah, my husband's big on, he has a recumbent bike and he watches movies on his recumbent. And that's like his thing.
Yeah.
He has private time and gets away from his nagging wife. So it works.
Yeah.
Who's that?
My husband.
Who's the nagging wife? I mean,
yeah, I don't think I'm a nagger.
Because it's not you.
It's absolutely not me.
There we go.
And I think in general, when it comes to, food and diet, I think you summed it up. You said it earlier. If it sounds like a fad, it's probably not something that's actually well tested. And just because your coworker or that person in that article you read on the internet says, I felt wonderful, and look at all of these properties that I made up that this thing can do, use your head.
Well, and
absolutely. I mean, the placebo effect is an effect, right? And yes, you may feel better, but it may just be because you're being conscious about your diet as you eat 5 pounds of bacon. Like, you just need to do everything in moderation and don't fall for these crazy fads. Try to have a well-balanced diet.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, this was great. Would love to have you back and touch base on other medical things in the future. It's always nice to have an expert on hand.
Absolutely. And maybe we can have you guys on our podcast.
Would love it.
That'd be great.
Welcome to the Bikerian Moment. So, for this one, I remember hearing about this, but drones.
Drones?
I don't know if you've been hearing news about this lately, and I just see it popping up, but they're like a real problem. They shut down Gatwick Airport.
I did see that.
Ago.
I didn't know why the drones were shutting it down.
Because they take up airspace and the planes can't chance flying into them. And there's been a lot of different things like requiring FAA license for drones of a certain size and different things like this. But you talk about modern problems because people are like, what can we do about this? And the answer is we don't have a solution. So there's companies trying to come up with jamming technologies and stuff like that. But of course, it's a real issue. And it really just made me think about how, modern technology in the tech industry, the phrase was coined disruptive technology. So, i.e., you come up with a way of shopping online that's so easy that everybody just does it, and all of a sudden Amazon's the biggest, online shopping place in the world. Or you come up with a new way of banking and suddenly everybody's adopted it and it's disruptive to what life was. But not all disruptive technology is positive. Some of it's really negative, There's aspects of Lyft and Uber being disruptive technology to the existing taxi networks and stuff. And, you can debate the pros and cons of a lot of this, but also with drones, you have technology that allows people to just throw things up in the air to what used to be pretty much controlled by traffic control experts at local airports. And now, you can shut down an airport by flying your drone up in the air. So it's just interesting because to me, I feel like we're going to be dealing with technology in this way for now and into the future. The more things we innovate and we see the positives, and also just have to deal with the negatives.
Yeah. And I love technology, and I am burdened by its existence on occasion. So it's interesting to recognize that there's ways in which that's also a larger community problem.
Yeah, and there's not much to do. I mean, people aren't going to really talk me out of taking lifts, even though I know that, some cities are trying to ban it or whatever. But, with drones, like there's no direct influence on my life. So it's easier for me to say, just don't do that, right? But people can use this stuff in a lot of different ways. And what do you have?
So mine was, or is, I should say, a New York Times article that was recently released on Planned Parenthood. they were accused of mistreating their pregnant employees. And I thought that was, obviously very Bicurian, because Planned Parenthood really stands for families and women and pregnant women being treated
OBGYN
quite
stuff.
well. Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the things I did love about how the Times framed it was they talked about employers that champion women face accusations of discriminating against their pregnant workers, showing how widespread the problem in America is. And I thought,
if they can't get it right, who can?
If they're challenged, then, just recognizing that places that aren't really committed to that might have even larger issues, and to maybe raise awareness of what that looks like. One of the women was talking about how she was counseling pregnant women, telling them to take care of their pregnancies when she felt like she couldn't do that. She couldn't take breaks that she needed to walk or get the kind of like snacks and water that she needed to really.
Isn't that employee surrounded by doctors?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and Summer, who we just talked to, because I was telling her about this, she said that, her experience is that that's healthcare in general. And I've known that from other people that I've met who work in the healthcare industry.
It's terrifying to know that, if you go to the emergency room, there's a very good chance that the intake nurse and possibly the doctor have been there for 18 hours.
Right. And haven't had a chance to pee in 6.
Right.
And that's kind of distracting.
I mean, and I get it. Healthcare is expensive enough, but it just seems like that could be a problem.
Yeah. So that for me was it caught my attention as a Bicurian moment to recognize that even when you're completely committed to something like health or pregnant women, you can still perhaps fall into the same trap that everybody else does.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. So with that, we will say thanks for listening. If you have ideas, feedback, thoughts, please find us on social media. We are Bicurian on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or you can give us a call at 720-507-7309. And you can always email us at podcast@bicurian.com.
And if you like what we are doing, please rate us on your listening platform of choice.
Thank you and have a great week.